All right, folks, buckle up because tonight we're stepping into the world of Victorian parties. Not the kind where you grab a beer and hit the dance floor, no. This is a whole different level. Picture this. The punch is suspiciously warm, the conversation is sharp enough to cut glass, and someone's definitely going to collapse from the vapors any minute now. Sounds like a wild time, right? Well, it is, if you know how to navigate it. Before we start, take a moment to hit that like button, but only if you're into what's about to go down. Drop a comment. Where are you listening from? What time is it in your corner of the world? And let me know, would you survive a Victorian party, or would you end up fainting yourself? Now dim those lights, find your fan for that perfect hum in the background and settle in. Oh, and maybe grab a blanket. Not because it's cold, but because you might need something to clutch onto when the drama kicks in. But let's hit pause for a sec. What exactly did these parties smell like? Was it all waltzing or did they actually dance? And how many corsets would it take to ruin someone's reputation? Oh, and if you were one of the servants, how many of these evenings did you endure without accidentally spilling something on a guest? Could you flirt while suffocating in whalebone? And what do you wear when no one knows your name, but they can tell how much you make? Stick with me, because we're about to find out. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1852. You're cordially invited to a party you didn't ask for, hosted by a family whose third cousin once met Prince Albert's footman. You're wearing 14 lbs of fabric. Your stomach is cinched halfway to collapse, and you're not allowed to sit down. Good luck. Your arrival is grandish. The carriage is wheezing like an asthmatic donkey, and you're fairly certain the driver is asleep, but you make it. The butler opens the door with the precise level of disdain reserved for people who are definitely not old money. You step down with all the poise of someone trying not to trip over 8 layers of petticoats while wondering if your corset is compressing something medically important. It is. It's compressing everything. Your spleen just sent a farewell telegram. You try to adjust your gloves. One is buttoned wrong. The other is on inside out. You do not correct either. It's too late. The manor looms before you like a smug architectural roast. Columns, gas lamps, and one particularly judgmental gargoyle. There is the faint but distinct smell of boiled turnip wafting from somewhere within. The front steps feel like a test. The butler, motionless and impossibly tall, eyes you with the cold intensity of a man who has seen too many social foci and not enough inheritances. He holds the door open just wide enough to let you in, but not wide enough for dignity. Inside, you are immediately swallowed by velvet. The entry hall is lined with thick red drapes, gaslit sconces, and an umbrella stand that probably has a title. Somewhere above, a chandelier threatens to drop its crystal guts if you so much as breathe too hard. You fumble with your calling card. Yes, that's a thing. Small pieces of paper with your name written in cursive, so elaborate it looks like an emotional seagull had a breakdown. You hand it to the butler. He looks at it like it personally insulted his grandmother, then disappears into the house, leaving you to stand awkwardly in the vestibule with your cloak still on, breathing heavily and trying not to sweat through your corset stays. A maid appears. She is 17, furious, and wearing starched linen so stiff it could walk away on its own. She wordlessly wrestles you out of your cloak like it's a sheep that wandered in off the moors. You try to thank her. She blinks twice and vanishes. Now you're alone again under the stern gaze of 8 ancestral portraits, all painted in tones of beige and disappointment. Each one looks like they invented gout. One is actively frowning at your hemline. You consider taking a step forward, but where? There are 3 hallways, 2 sets of double doors, and 1 taxidermy badger mounted next to a sconce. He's wearing a tiny waistcoat. You wonder briefly if he too once arrived by mistake. Footsteps. Someone is coming. You straighten your spine. Adjust your expression into what you hope is gentle neutrality, and prepare to say, "Delighted to be here," in a tone that suggests you are definitely not plotting escape. It's the host. She glides toward you, her dress rustling like a dying bush, and greets you with a smile so thin it could slice butter. She does not remember your name. You do not remember hers, but it's all pleasantries and soft vowels. Now you're ushered inside. The door closes behind you with a sound not unlike a vault ceiling. Somewhere in the house, a piano starts playing something vaguely tragic. You are officially in. Congratulations, you've crossed the threshold. You are underdressed, over-perfumed, and already too warm. And the party hasn't even started yet. You are greeted not with warmth, but with a hallway stacked with other people's belongings and the suffocating scent of mothballs and pomade. You try to discreetly unbutton your cloak and accidentally dislodge a hat stand. Party's off to a strong start. The hat stand, by the way, is not just a hat stand. It's a 12-armed wooden beast carved to resemble something vaguely Greco-Roman, perhaps a laurel-wreathed octopus. You knock loose 2 hats, a parasol, and what might be someone's fox stole. The fox stares at you in death, judging your every movement. You apologize out loud to the fox. You attempt to recover by hanging up your cloak, only to discover there is nowhere to hang it. Every peg is taken by coats that belong to people with at least 3 more vowels in their surnames than you. You awkwardly drape yours over a random hook, causing a domino effect that ends with a muff falling to the floor. You freeze. Do you pick it up? Is that allowed? Is there a hierarchy to muff touching? The butler is nowhere to be seen, and you're too afraid to ask. The wax figure in the corner, who may or may not be an actual guest. Someone breezes past you wearing a cloud of lavender and disapproval. She glances at your shoes. You didn't know shoes could be insulted by proximity, but here we are. You briefly consider leaving, inventing a family emergency, or claiming your horse has gout, but it's too late. You're committed. Social contracts are legally binding in this house. To your right is a narrow table covered in calling cards, most of which are embossed, gold-edged and aggressive in their display of lineage. You spot one with a crest that includes a falcon, a Latin motto, and a passive-aggressive flourish. You pretend not to notice yours is already half covered by someone named Lady Wilhelmina Forskew Snelling. At the far end of the hallway stands an enormous mirror, warped slightly with age and confidence issues. You catch your reflection in it and realize your hair has begun to wilt under the combined pressures of humidity and anxiety. You attempt to fix it with a gloved hand, succeeding only in statically electrifying your bangs into a shape best described as frightened fan. Footman appears silently, as if conjured by your shame. He gestures for you to move toward the main room, but he doesn't say anything. He just stares. The silence is louder than any reprimand. You nod like you understand the silent language of hallway etiquette. You do not. You're reasonably sure you just agreed to donate your kidneys to the host. You step around a small cluster of discarded parasols. One is embroidered, one is broken, one is still damp, and you're not sure if it's from rain or fear. There's a long, muffled thud from somewhere upstairs. You hope it's not another fainting guest, or worse, another impromptu poetry recital. Just before you escape the hallway, you pass a chair with a lumpy cushion. Sitting on the cushion is a small decorative dog, or perhaps it's a taxidermy one. It doesn't blink, it just exists, permanently disappointed, like a furry chaperone. And then just as you're about to step through into the next room, someone behind you sneezes loudly. You reflexively say, "Bless you," and 6 people in earshot turn around to glare. You have just committed the worst crime of all, acknowledging that bodies exist. Congratulations, you've survived the hallway. You are slightly sweaty, vaguely humiliated, and now officially part of the party. It can only get worse from here. The drawing room is a battlefield of glances. Conversations are hushed, eyebrows are active, and you've already been assessed, catalogued, and ranked based on your boots. To be clear, these boots were your best option. They're polished, possibly fashionable, and only mildly pinching your toes into the shape of Victorian punctuation. But to the crowd gathered in this room, who seem to glide rather than walk and never sweat, only glow, your boots have already outed you as middle tier, possibly provincial, likely related to a solicitor. You attempt to stand still. Standing still is safe. Movement risks attention. Attention invites conversation. Conversation invites failure. The furniture doesn't help. Each couch is a trap. Each chair a puzzle. Some are reserved. Some are occupied by lace-draped women with parasols that double as judgmental antennae. One settee holds a pair of young men speaking in quiet, bored French. You consider approaching, until one glances up and raises an eyebrow so high it enters another tax bracket. Instead, you hover near a table displaying delicate porcelain miniatures of buildings no one actually lives in. There's a teacup holding potpourri and a sugar dish that appears to contain actual diamonds. You nod at it as if to say yes. This is very cup. It does not respond. Someone nearby laughs. It's the kind of laugh that means something. You're not sure what it means, but it wasn't meant for you. That much is certain. A cluster of ladies, somewhere between 19 and 40, depending on corset tightness, are performing synchronized fan fluttering. It's mesmerizing. One of them catches your eye for exactly 1 second too long, then turns to whisper into her friend's ear. Her friend doesn't look at you. Her friend looks through you. You're starting to sweat. It's not visible yet, but your undergarments are becoming increasingly aware of your mortality. A man with impressive sideburns strolls past, humming to himself and adjusting his cuffs like he invented sleeves. You give a polite half-smile, and he responds with a curt nod that could either mean good, evening, or please don't speak to me, peasant. The host's daughter floats by in a cloud of organza, trailed by 3 hopeful bachelors and 1 aggressive perfume. She does not look at you. She doesn't need to. Her posture alone informs you that your hemline is half an inch too long for confidence, but an inch too short for credibility. Somewhere in the room, a tall man clears his throat and begins a story involving a pheasant, a bishop, and a regrettable game of whiz. Laughter follows. You do not understand the punchline, but you laugh anyway, 2 beats too late and slightly too loud. The woman beside you winces as if you've just burped in Latin. You retreat toward a bookshelf. The books are mostly for decoration and have titles like On the Moral Fortitude of Herring and volumes 2V of Lord Plimpton's account of brick. You pull one out for cover. It's hollow. Inside is a hidden flask labeled Not for Cousin Reginald. You don't drink it, but you think about it. Then mercifully someone announces that the piano recital will begin shortly. There is a collective shift as the crowd begins to funnel toward the music room. You blend into the movement, pretending you belong, pretending you're not absolutely spiritually exhausted by the effort of existing in this room. As you leave, you hear someone murmur, "Well, she seems pleasant." You have no idea if it's about you, but for now, you choose to believe it is because in the Victorian drawing room, that's the closest thing you'll get to a win. Victorian party conversation is a sport. The rules are simple. Say nothing directly, imply everything, and never mention bodily functions or the lower classes. You are now in a passive-aggressive duel with a woman named Henrietta. Henrietta's smile is sharp enough to slice fruit. Her tone is syrupy, but only if the syrup had been left out overnight and now contains bees. She's complimenting your gloves, which is confusing because you're not wearing gloves. You realize she's actually complimenting the idea of your gloves. The unspoken message, "A brave choice to come bare-handed, dear." You counter with a gentle observation about her hair ribbon, which appears to be strangling a taxidermy bird. "Such bold colors," you say. "You must have been feeling quite adventurous." Henrietta blinks slowly, the way a cat does just before it pushes a glass off the table. This is not conversation. This is chess with eye contact and poison-tipped niceties. Nearby, two men are debating the merits of railroads, using only metaphor and disdain. One is arguing that industrial progress will ruin the quiet dignity of soot-free leisure. The other is wearing a monlay and holding a glass of claret like it's a weaponized grape. Neither has ever operated a shovel. You nod along, pretending to understand. You say something neutral like change is certainly an experience, and are rewarded with approving grunts. You are now a confirmed expert in vague platitudes. Back with Henrietta, the topic has shifted to mutual acquaintances. You don't know any of them. Henrietta knows all of them. She drops names like they're hot coals and watches to see if you flinch. You don't, mostly because your brain is focused on keeping your posture upright while your spine quietly gives up. Someone offers you a small biscuit. You accept it because chewing buys time. It tastes like chalk and inherited trauma. You smile anyway. Henrietta does not blink. You are now 90% certain she is fueled entirely by spite and lemon water. The room hums with conversation, but not a single sentence has any nutritional value. No one is discussing anything real. No one is admitting to boredom. Everyone is locked in an intricate ballet of nods, smirks, and subtle barbs about each other's upholstery. You attempt to joke, a harmless observation about the weather. Henrietta responds, "Yes, rain is quite persistent, much like some of our newer guests." You are the newer guests. You nod as though grateful to be compared to moisture. An older woman enters the conversation. Her name is probably Agnes. She's wearing 16 brooches and smells faintly of violets and authoritarianism. She asks, "Where you summer?" Not if you summer. Where? You panic and say Cornwall because it sounds respectable and vaguely damp. She approves. You have passed, barely. The conversation moves to literature. Henrietta claims to be reading Cranford, which she pronounces with a sigh that implies she's only doing it out of noblesse oblige. You mention Dickens. Henrietta stiffens. Agnes clutches her pearls, not in horror, but out of sheer instinct. You've said something popular. How dare you? There is a pause. You sip your tea and smile blandly, like a decorative pillow at risk of being replaced. The tension breaks when a distant servant drops a tray. Everyone jumps. You use the moment to excuse yourself with an elegant lie. You must check on your cousin, who doesn't exist, but might be in trouble. You say this with enough gravitas that no one questions it. As you walk away, you hear Henrietta murmur, "What an interesting sort of person." You choose to interpret this as a compliment, because in Victorian small talk, interesting is basically a standing ovation. Behold the buffet, a selection of meats with mysterious textures, cheeses that smell like regret, and a trifle that's mostly cherry and despair. You eat something grey and pretend to enjoy it. The table is a long, groaning mahogany monstrosity draped in a lace runner and dotted with silver serving utensils so heavy you could use one to dislodge a chimney flue. Every dish glistens faintly under the dim gaslight, though whether from sauce or sweat is unclear. There's steam where there shouldn't be, and a distinct lack of it where you wish there was. You approach cautiously, like a naturalist surveying a predator's nest. There's a dish labeled pressed ox tongue, which you suspect may still be emotionally recovering from the experience. Beside it, a glutinous heap called calf's head surprise. The surprise, presumably, is that it's still making eye contact. You try to be strategic, nothing too ambitious. You reach for what appears to be roast fowl, possibly chicken, possibly the ghost of a pheasant, and your hand collides with someone else's. You both recoil, social death narrowly avoided. You nod at the stranger with mutual buffet remorse. There are jellied things, many jellied things. Someone in this household believes that all food, if left long enough, should congeal. Eggs are suspended in aspic, meats are glazed in gelatin. A carrot appears to be mid-rescue from a shimmering amber cube. You wonder if it's blinking in Morse code for help. Then there's the cheese section. Oh, the cheese. Some of it is blue, some of it is beige, and one specimen seems to be actively retreating. You make the mistake of smelling it directly. Your soul briefly leaves your body. It returns with questions. At the center of the table stands the trifle. It's towering, undulating, and possibly sentient. There's a generous pour of cherry involved, though no one is quite sure how recently that happened. The top layer looks promising. Sponge, cream, fruit. But below the surface lurks a substance that can only be described as fruit-adjacent goo. You take a spoonful. It tastes like a memory of better times. To drink a tepid punch that tastes vaguely of citrus and absolutely of disappointment. It's been sitting out for hours, surrounded by floating lemon slices and judgment. There's also a decanter of wine, but it's being fiercely guarded by a gentleman in a cravat who has clearly declared himself sommelier by force of will alone. The bread is firm, possibly from a previous season. You try to break off a piece, and it responds with a crunch that echoes like a pistol shot. A woman nearby clutches her pearls. You mumble something about rustic textures and move on. You eventually settle into a corner, plate in hand, chewing what you suspect is pork, but might also be heavily perfumed wallpaper paste. Footman strolls past, offering an additional slice of something vaguely liver-based. You decline, and he nods in quiet solidarity. You are now allies in this culinary battlefield. A woman next to you loudly proclaims that the blanc mange is simply divine. You both know this is a lie, but you nod politely because this is Victorian party law. You must never admit that anything tastes less than splendid. Even as your taste buds attempt to surrender and flee through the nearest orifice, eventually you find yourself nibbling a cracker while staring into the middle distance, wondering when exactly you lost control of your evening. Someone suggests seconds. You decline, gently patting your stomach as if to say, "No, thank you. I've already endured enough." You stack your empty plate on a sideboard and back away from the food with the haunted expression of someone who survived something unspeakable. Because in the Victorian buffet line, flavor is optional, endurance is not. You are now trapped in a semi-formal hostage situation. A 17-year-old girl named Doratha is playing a piece by Chopin. Badly, you cannot leave. You cannot blink. You must clap enthusiastically. Doratha, bless her privileged little heart, is seated at a grand piano that has not been tuned since the Crimean War. She is wearing lace gloves, which is presumably why her fingers can't find a single correct note. But what she lacks in skill, she makes up for in sheer emotional volume. The poor piano wheezes beneath her, producing a sound somewhere between a startled goose and a ghost trapped in a music box. You are sitting 3 chairs deep in a formation of attentive bodies, each more uncomfortable than the last. The chairs are unpadded. The air is thick with perfume and suffering. Someone's powdered wig is obstructing your view of the pianist, which would be a mercy if not for the additional burden of breathing in talcum and betrayal every time they shift. Doratha is now halfway through what you believe to be a nocturne, although it could also be a very dramatic interpretation of indigestion. Her mother is seated in the front row, beaming with the full force of maternal denial. Her fan flutters approvingly. Her pearls shimmer with delusion. You attempt to adopt an expression of cultured delight. What you achieve is something between mild nausea and polite despair. Every time Doratha appears to pause, you tense in preparation for applause, only for her to lurch back into another somehow louder section. She plays with the confidence of someone who has never been told no, and the finger technique of a manatee wearing mittens. Her eyes are closed, her soul is elsewhere, possibly in pain. To your left, a vicar is visibly weeping. Whether from emotion or prolonged sonic exposure, it's hard to tell. Someone tries to cough discreetly, perhaps hoping to create an intermission. Doratha plays louder. She cannot be stopped. She is a locomotive of unearned passion and unpredictable rhythm. She briefly switches keys, intentionally or not, no one knows, and launches into what could generously be called a cadenza. You recognize exactly 0 of the notes. A servant quietly enters with a tray of teacups. You lock eyes for a moment. He nods gently as if to say, "I too have known suffering." You consider pretending to faint, just for the excuse to leave the room, but the effort of collapsing gracefully in a corset might actually kill you. Eventually, finally, miraculously, Doratha slams her hands down on the keyboard in what must be the final chord. It sounds like a sack of potatoes falling down a marble staircase. There is a silence, sacred, still a moment of collective spiritual cleansing. And then, as one, the audience erupts into applause, too loud, too long, too relieved. You are clapping with the enthusiasm of someone who just escaped a cave-in. You lock eyes with an elderly gentleman across the room. He mouths, "Thank God." Doratha curtsies twice. Her bow is somehow longer than the piece. She smiles the smile of someone who believes her destiny includes Vienna and probably a husband with a baronet's. Her mother dabs her eyes, and someone in the second row declares it transcendent. You all lie together, united in shared deception and the burning need for a strong drink. The recital is over, but deep inside you a single note still rings. Off-key forever, "Who am I?" has never been more existential. You're sweating under layers of silk while trying to guess that someone has written Napoleon's dentist on your forehead. Laughter sounds suspiciously like judgment. The game began innocently enough, introduced by a woman with far too many opinions about moral character and a hat shaped like a tiered cake. "Let's play something light," she chirped, before assigning roles that seem hand-picked to expose everyone's deepest anxieties. The card on your forehead is askew, and you're beginning to wonder if it was chosen with malice. Probably. You are seated in a semicircle of people pretending to be amused. Most are too polite to say they have no idea who they are. One man guessed the Earl of Sandwich 7 times in a row. It was not him. It was horrifyingly Marie Antoinette's hairdresser. Victorian parlor games, you now realize, are not about fun. They're about humiliation, hierarchy, and controlled chaos. This is less game night and more social evisceration disguised as entertainment. There's a footman standing in the corner pretending not to watch, but you know he is. Everyone is. You say, "Am I a nobleman?" Someone smirks. Someone else coughs. The hostess says, "Well, not in the traditional sense," which feels like a personal attack. Next to you, a young man named Pearl is sweating through his cravat while trying to mime sauerkraut in a game of charades. It is not going well. He looks like he's having a polite seizure. No one is helping him. His fiancée stares at the floor. Then comes the forfeits game. Ah, yes. An innocent item is taken from each player and placed in a pile. The host's daughter, eyes gleaming with quiet tyranny, picks up each item and demands the owner perform a task to retrieve it. Someone's glove has just earned them the punishment of singing "God Save the Queen" while hopping on one foot. You have handed over your fan, which is now being waved mockingly in your direction as you are told to recite a romantic poem to the person to your left. That person is Henrietta. Yes, that Henrietta. Her eyebrows rise so high you worry they'll detach and float away. You recite Byron through clenched teeth. She claps slowly. In another corner, guests are playing Blind Man's Bluff, which is essentially Victorian tag, but with more bruises and less dignity. A blindfolded man has just walked full speed into a harpsichord. Everyone pretends not to notice. The hostess claps and says, "Isn't this delightful?" like someone who hasn't felt joy since the Reform Act. You begin to wonder what Victorian people did before parlour games, and then you realise nothing. This is their entertainment. There is no Netflix, no trivia apps, no quiet scrolling through your phone, pretending to laugh at a meme while avoiding eye contact. This is the meme, and you're in it. Another game starts. It's called The Minister's Cat. You are told to describe the minister's cat using adjectives in alphabetical order. It is now your turn. The group has made it to L. You panic and blurt out, "The minister's cat is lumpy." Everyone laughs. You are not sure if it's with you or at you, probably both. The night drags on. The games continue. You've fake laughed so many times. Your cheeks are numb. Someone is now suggesting a game called Hunt the Slipper, which sounds like a euphemism, but isn't. It's just crawling around on your knees while trying to find someone's lost footwear. And yet, despite the absurdity, the mild physical trauma, and the profound emotional scarring, you stay. Because in a room full of gossip, silk and chandeliers, no one wants to be the one who refuses the fun. Even when the fun feels like psychological warfare in a corset, someone has swooned again. This time it's Mr. Halberton, which is awkward because he's 6 tall and built like a wardrobe. The fainting couch groans under the pressure. So does your soul. The room shifts immediately like vultures circling a tea tray. Guests begin to cluster around with the polite urgency of people desperate for something, anything to talk about. "Oh, my," says Lady Mabel, a woman who lives for precisely this sort of minor crisis. How terribly masculine of him. The fainting couch is not pleased. Designed for dainty collapses and overdramatic sighs, it is now hosting a fully grown man who has taken swoon and turned it into a structural hazard. One leg of the couch cacks ominously. Someone suggests reinforcing it with a tea tray. No one moves. You stand a respectable distance away, pretending to be concerned, but mostly wondering whether this will delay dessert. A footman appears with smelling salts and the resigned expression of someone who's been here before. He waves the bottle under Mr. Halberton's nose with the same energy one might use to annoy a cat. There is no response. Lady Agnes fans herself dramatically. "Fetch a doctor," she cries, despite the fact that the last doctor who came to this house was asked to remove a cravat-related rash and ended up staying for gooseberry tart. He is still here somewhere, possibly asleep in the conservatory. A maid runs off to locate him. Meanwhile, several guests take turns speculating about what caused the faint. "Low blood sugar," says one. "Too many feelings," says another. "Perhaps he heard Dorothy's piano playing again." Someone mutters under their breath. You stifle a laugh. Mr. Halberton stirs. A collective gasp fills the air. He opens his eyes and immediately begins apologizing, which only makes everything worse. He tries to sit up, fails, and instead slides awkwardly into a half-reclined position that exposes an alarming amount of sock. His cravat is askew. His dignity has left the building. The hostess arrives, flanked by 2 concerned pugs and the aura of someone hoping this doesn't end up in the Illustrated London News. He's very sensitive, she explains to no one in particular. He once fainted during a shadow puppet show. The doctor arrives at last. He is out of breath and holding a scone. He checks Mr. Halberton's pulse, nods once, and prescribes fresh air and a firm pudding. This is Victorian medicine. It sounds ridiculous, and yet it often worked. Mr. Halberton is gently led away to a shower in the music room, now deemed less dramatic. The fainting couch, freed from its burden, sighs in relief and returns to its original shape, though slightly more world-weary. You're left wondering what it would take for you to faint convincingly. Emotional trauma, corset constriction, overexposure to aspic, all plausible. But the real reason might simply be to get out of another parlour game. The conversation has now pivoted seamlessly into tales of other fainting episodes. A lady once collapsed upon learning her husband preferred marmalade. A young man once swooned at the sight of a hedgehog. Apparently, fainting is the body's only defense against Victorian society. Someone offers you a cordial, you accept you've earned it, And as you sip something that tastes like fermented violets and indecision, you glance back at the fainting couch, once again empty, once again innocent, until the next scandal. Because in the great theatre of Victorian parties, the swoon is never truly over. You've been offered a dance, but your card is suspiciously empty. Apparently has good ankles isn't enough to get you invited to the quadrille. You pretend you prefer standing awkwardly near the fern. The fern, to its credit, offers zero judgment. Unlike the cluster of young debutantes across the room, all of whom appear to have filled their cards 3 times over, and are now debating whether to pencil in a 4th waltz with Cousin Harold without damaging their reputations. You, on the other hand, have scribbled TBD 6 times and added a hopeful doodle of a cello no one has noticed. A man with a Monley approaches, glances at your card and says, "Ah, then he walks away." You're not sure what it meant, but you suspect your social ranking has just dropped another 3 points. The fern rustles in solidarity. The hostess glides by, complimenting everyone's posture. You straighten like someone being inspected for smuggling scones, not dancing. She trills in the tone of someone who already knows the answer and is enjoying it. You smile thinly and say, "I find observation more enlightening." She doesn't laugh. She pats your arm like you're very brave and possibly ill. You watch the couples lining up for the quadrille, an aggressive square dance masquerading as elegance. They bow, curtsy, step, spin, retreat, and repeat. The tempo is somewhere between brisk walk and frantic. Window cleaning. One lady loses a shoe. Her partner retrieves it with the precision of someone who's done this before. Nearby, a girl with ringlets whispers to her friend, "Don't dance with Arthur." He sweats through his gloves. You check your own gloves just in case. Dry for now, but the night is young. The orchestra swells. A man with sideburns and an air of mild confusion offers his hand. "Shall we?" he asks. You blink. Your brain screams. Your hand lifts of its own accord. The fern waves goodbye. You're in the line now. It's happening. You are dancing. Well, dancing. You perform the movements you practiced alone in your room while trying not to knock over the chamber pot. You curtsy. He bows. You nearly forget which foot to start with, then commit to the wrong one with the confidence of a drunk flamingo. You try to make conversation. "Lovely evening," you say. He replies, "I once saw a man swallow an entire sardine whole." You smile and nod. Perfect. Absolutely normal. He twirls you unexpectedly. You spin a second too far and have to pretend it was intentional. A gentleman near you stumbles, causing a ripple effect that knocks 3 people into a potted plant. You hear someone say, "Gracious heavens," which is code for "this is a catastrophe." The dance ends with an abrupt final chord and scattered clapping. You return to the fern, heart racing, hair slightly undone, dignity semi-intact. You survived. You check your card. The man's name is illegible. It looks like Lord Bumblewit. You leave it. Someone else approaches. He's young, earnest, and already apologizing for his 2 left feet. You accept his invitation because your options are limited and your ankles are fantastic. Thank you very much. You continue dancing. You miss steps. You bump elbows. You laugh once, genuinely. It's not elegant, but it's real. Later, as the music softens and couples begin to drift toward lemonade and gossip, you return to your spot by the fern. A woman beside you fans herself and mutters, "2 dances in 1 night? Scandalous," you grin. Mission accomplished. Because in the world of Victorian dance cards, social capital is tallied 1 awkward twirl at a time. And tonight, you're finally on the board. There's music. Technically, the string quartet is valiantly murdering Beethoven in the corner. You try to find the rhythm, but it keeps moving like a caffeinated goat. The violins shriek. The cello groans. The violinist is playing with the haunted expression of someone being paid in stale biscuits. At first you assume they're tuning. Then you realize they're performing. The conductor, a thin man with a cravat large enough to be its own guest, is waving his baton in what looks like Morse code for "please send help." The piece allegedly is a waltz, but it sounds more like the internal monologue of a teapot having a nervous breakdown. You nod politely because it's what one does. To display discomfort would be gotch. To express pain would be common. The musicians seem to be engaged in some kind of tonal rebellion. The first violinist has taken liberties. The second violinist is clearly playing an entirely different piece. The pianist has entered a parallel dimension. The clarinetist, why is there a clarinetist, is doing jazz apparently, and no one can stop him. A lady nearby sighs and says, "Ah, music, the language of the soul." You consider replying yes. And right now it's screaming, but decide to nod and let your eardrums do the protesting. The host appears, hands clasped behind his back, smiling like someone who's already prepared his defense in court. They're quite experimental, he says, beaming at the quartet. Very avant-garde. You didn't know Beethoven had a dubstep phase. But here we are. The chist attempts a solo. It sounds like a haunted wardrobe. A chandelier trembles slightly. Whether from bass vibrations or shared anxiety, you can't tell. Echild in the back begins crying. The mother coos, "Shh, darling," the nice menar playing music. The child wails louder, clearly in disagreement. One gentleman near the punch table tries to tap his foot to the beat. His leg twitches once, then gives up entirely. Another lady attempts to dance. It's not successful. She sways bravely for a few seconds, then nods at her partner and mutters, "Perhaps we wait for something more melodic." The musicians themselves look trapped, victims of a sheet music switcheroo, doomed to repeat the same 4 measures of chaos while trying not to make eye contact with the audience. The viola player is now aggressively sweating. The pianist is muttering in German. The conductor keeps waving his arms, but at this point it's mostly for cardiovascular benefit. You glance at the program. It says, "An evening of delicate harmonies." There is nothing delicate about what's happening. It is musical civil war. The oboe just entered the fray. No one invited the oboe. A crash, not loud but definite. One of the violinists has snapped a string. The sound rings out like a gunshot in a library. Half the room jumps. The other half politely pretends not to have noticed. The music stops. Finally, a moment of blessed golden silence. And then applause. Thunderous, frenzied, far too enthusiastic to be genuine. You join in, clapping with the desperate gratitude of someone who's just survived a bear encounter. The musicians bow. The clarinetist knocks over a candle. A footman catches it mid-air. The crowd gasps. It is the most successful performance of the evening. As the quartet retreats, you hear someone whisper, "Quite modern, wasn't it?" Another replies, "Yes, like modern plumbing. Necessary, but best kept discreet." You sip your now lukewarm punch and wonder if your ears will ever recover. Because in Victorian society, music is not meant to soothe the soul. It's meant to test your tolerance and your taste in compliments. Halfway through your second waltz, your corset trebles. It's no longer shaping your figure. It's holding your ribs hostage. You excuse yourself to the powder room and contemplate crime. The powder room, for the record, is not a sanctuary. It's a gilded interrogation chamber filled with mirrors, faint floral scents, and women who've mastered the art of pretending everything is fine while quietly dying inside. You find an empty corner, remove your gloves, and perform the most delicate operation Victorian society allows, unhooking one tiny clasp at the very top of your stays and praying it doesn't trigger a structural collapse. You're sweating. Not delicately, not romantically, just plain mortal sweating. The kind that says, "This is how I go." Your corset, once a firm but loyal companion, has decided tonight is the night it will pursue a personal vendetta. It's squeezing like a Victorian anaconda. Your lungs have been reduced to whispering. Your spine has filed a formal complaint. You take a moment to reflect on your choices. Perhaps you shouldn't have worn the conversation corset, the one designed to impress from across the room, but punish at close range. Or perhaps you shouldn't have inhaled half a pound of calf's head aspic before attempting a physically demanding social ritual. But it's too late. The damage is done. A lady next to you is fanning herself aggressively. "Tight this evening, isn't it?" she says, smiling through gritted teeth. You nod, unable to produce actual words. She leans in and whispers, "I keep a safety pin sewn into my hem just in case." Last week I passed out during a gavotte and woke up under a piano. You are not comforted, but you are no longer alone. You stagger toward a small settee and lower yourself slowly, cautiously, like a wounded swan. Your corset cacks. You're afraid if you bend wrong, your stays will shoot out like shrapnel. A servant glides by, pretending not to notice you, gasping like a Victorian accordion. In the mirror, you see your face turning a pleasant shade of pomegranate. Your hair is frizzing. Your left eye is twitching. You've entered the corset delirium phase of the evening. Time slows. Somewhere you hear harp music. It might be real. It might be your brain's final goodbye. You debate loosening another hook. Just one. Just a whisper of rebellion. But then you hear the door crack open, and two ladies enter mid-gossip. You freeze. One adjusts her bodice. The other declares, "I heard Lady Gisham once fainted just to get out of speaking to the bishop." You make eye contact with yourself in the mirror. You are Lady Gisham now. You rise, shakily reinstate the top clasp, and dab at your forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief you don't remember acquiring. You rejoin the party with the posture of someone attempting to look elegant while actively holding in a scream. Back in the ballroom, your dance partner finds you. "Another waltz?" he asks. You laugh short, sharp, wheezy. "I think," you reply. "I shall watch this round." It smiles, completely unaware that your internal organs have shifted like furniture in a moving carriage. You plant yourself near a refreshment table and breathe as shallowly as etiquette allows. A man walks by and says, "You're glowing." You're not. You're leaking, but it's kind of him to lie. Eventually, the worst passes, or you just stop feeling things below your collarbone. Because in the Victorian era, corsets aren't just garments. They're lifestyle choices. They say, "I value posture more than oxygen. I prioritize aesthetics over internal stability. I have survived, and I may never fully recover, but at least you look incredible doing it." Welcome to the powder room, where dignity goes to weep and gossip, thrives like mold. Someone's crying about a broken engagement. Someone else is plotting a duel. You just want air, but air is in short supply. Instead, the room is thick with perfume, secrets, and emotional instability. The scent is somewhere between lavender and hysteria. At least 4 different floral waters are battling for dominance, and your lungs are the battlefield. You take a shallow breath and try to find a corner that isn't occupied by tears, rage, or passive-aggressive mirror pining. A woman with suspiciously perfect hair is sobbing into an embroidered handkerchief. "He said he loved me," she wails, but then he danced with her. Everyone in the room knows who her is. Her is standing 10 feet away, reapplying rouge and pretending she can't hear through 3 layers of moral superiority. Across the room, a lady in a mauve gown is whispering to a friend. Whispering is an art form here. It's not about secrecy. It's about theatrics. You're meant to hear every third word and draw your own scandalous conclusions. Duel florists sans réputation in tatus classique. You approach the basin, splash a little rose water on your face, and make eye contact with yourself in the mirror. You look like someone who has danced, eaten, fainted emotionally, if not physically, and is now considering starting a new life as a governess in Canada. There's nowhere to sit that isn't occupied by some kind of emotional unraveling. A girl slumped on the chassis, recounting a tragic tale of her cousin being snubbed for wearing last season's sleeve length. Another woman is viciously blotting her forehead and muttering, "Never again. I'll marry a lighthouse keeper and never speak to society again." Someone hands her a mint. She bites it like it owes her money. Meanwhile, the hostess's niece, perhaps 12 years old, dressed like a diplomatic bouquet, is eavesdropping with the precision of a court stenographer. She's going to write a novel one day. Everyone in this room will be in it. No one will come off well. The room is loud with the sounds of crinoline rustling, hairpins hitting the floor, and layered complaints about mothers, corsets, and the scandalous behavior of Lady Evangeline, who is apparently attempting to flirt with 3 brothers simultaneously. You silently cheer her on. A maid tiptoes in with a fresh tray of lavender towels. Everyone pretends not to notice her, then immediately uses the towels with the entitled grace of people who believe fresh linens are a natural right. The maid retreats, rolling her eyes with the skill of a seasoned professional. You finally find a chair. It's next to a woman silently sipping brandy from a flask hidden in her reticule. She glances at you and whispers, "Don't marry for money. Marry for land." You nod solemnly. She might be your new spiritual guide. Someone starts crying again. It's unclear if it's a new crier or a recurring one. The line between fresh heartbreak and recycled drama is paper thin in this room. A debate breaks out over whether it's worse to be jilted before the engagement or after. You don't contribute. You're still trying to figure out whether your hair is frizzing or if it's just trying to escape the party entirely. At last, someone suggests returning to the ballroom. Everyone groans, repowders, reapplies, and emotionally armors themselves in a final layer of indifference. You stand, adjust your bodice, and prepare to re-enter the fray. Because in the powder room, tears are temporary. Gossip is forever, and your dance card miraculously is filling up. There's always one. This time it's Colonel Whittlesby, who's slurring stories about the Crimean War and spilling sherry onto the wallpaper. You're unsure whether to help or flee. He's propped up beside the fireplace like a wilting fuss, surrounded by a growing radius of polite concern and actual dread. His uniform is from 2 decades and at least 1 major empire ago, and his mustache appears to have achieved sentience. You don't understand. He bellows, pointing at a sconce, as if it had personally betrayed him. That damn soup was colder than the trenches. You nod gently. You're not sure what soup he means. No one is. There has been no soup tonight. There may never have been soup. Colonel Whittlesby clutches his crystal cherry glass, like it contains the last drop of civilization. Unfortunately, it does not. He gestures wildly while describing a cavalry charge and sloshes the remains of his drink across a floral wallpaper that definitely did not sign up for battle. The pattern darkens, so does the mood. A footman appears, armed with a rag and the haunted look of someone who's seen this before. He gently blots the wall while the colonel sings what may be a regimental anthem, or possibly just a tune about pickled onions. It's hard to tell through the hiccups. The hostess floats by, her eyes scanning the damage with the precision of a sniper. She smiles tight, frozen. "How spirited," she says, then vanishes before she's roped into a story about mules and trenchfoot. You envy her tactical retreat. Colonel Whittlesby is no holding court, regaling a cluster of unwilling guests with tales that start somewhere near Crimea and end somewhere near total fiction. "We fought with our bare hands. I tell you," he says, thumping his chest. "No boots, nor rations, just sheer British will, and an angry marmot named Gerald. You back away slowly, like someone trying not to startle a wild animal. But it's too late." He locks eyes with you. You Heshouts, delighted and slightly cross-eyed. "You look like you know discipline. Ever ridden into enemy fire on a donkey?" "No," you reply cautiously. "But I once crossed a field wearing the wrong shoes." He roars with laughter and throws an arm around your shoulder. His breath smells like cherry, pipe tobacco, and historical inaccuracy. You are now part of the narrative. Insists you help refill his glass, which you do mostly to keep him from liberating the punch bowl. He toasts to Queen and country, then forgets why and starts a monologue about pigeons used in espionage. Everyone else has cleared the room. It's just you, the colonel, the footman, and the wallpaper, which is beginning to peel slightly under emotional duress. A servant tries to guide him toward a settee. "Time to rest, sir." "Nonsense," he declares, standing upright and immediately falling sideways into a potted plant. A gasp, a pause, a round of applause. You help him up sort of, and he insists he's fine. "It's the carpet," he explains. "Very traitorous. Reminds me of Baku." Eventually, 2 very large butlers escort the colonel upstairs, still rambling about how war builds character and how someone named Clarice once tried to duel a telegraph pole. The room exhales. You glance at the damaged wallpaper. A stain remains, purple, sticky, and oddly shaped like affox. It will become part of the house's lore. A guest near the sideboard shakes his head and mutters. "Every party," you nod. "It's a rite of passage. The sherry, the storytelling, the slow-motion social disaster, all inevitable. Because in every Victorian gathering, There is always a drunk uncle, a ruined wall, and a tale that begins with glory and ends with upholstery damage. Every wall has a portrait. Every portrait is glaring at you. One painting of a dead aunt seems to disapprove of your earrings. You consider apologizing to a canvas. Victorian portraiture is not known for its whimsy. The eyes are small, the lips are tight, and the eyebrows are aggressively arched as though frozen mid-judgment. Each painting appears to be capturing the exact moment someone heard something mildly scandalous and chose never to forgive anyone ever. You try not to look directly at them, but it's impossible. They're everywhere. Above the fireplace, above the sideboard, at the top of the stairs, an army of ancestors staring down from their ornate frames with the kind of intensity normally reserved for border collies and disappointed headmasters. There's Lord Pembroke the Elder, who once bankrupted 3 estates and still looks like you're the financial burden. Beside him is Lady Edith, whose neck ruff is so vast it has its own gravitational field. Heres follow you across the room. You move left, she moves left, you move right. She's already there watching, judging. You pause in front of a portrait of a child holding what appears to be a dead bird and a live sense of vengeance. The plaque reads, Thomas, aged 6. You don't know what Thomas did, but it's clear he never blinked once in his life. He's probably still somewhere in the attic waiting. A guest beside you comments, the ancestors. Aren't they magnificent? You nod, trying to match the tone of admiration. But all you can think is, why is the great-grandmother holding a skull? Is that a symbol of mortality, or just something she found in the conservatory? Another painting features a man with a scowl and truly unsettling fingers. Too long, too curled. He looks like he's planning a heist and blaming you for it in advance. The room is silent, but his expression says, you overcooked the lamb, and I will never forget. You notice that none of the portraits are smiling, not one. Perhaps because smiling required a level of joy that didn't align with Victorian dental technology, or perhaps because the act of portrait sitting demanded 3 hours of stillness and deep simmering resentment. You sit beneath one such painting, a particularly stern bishop with a nose like a vulture's beak, and immediately feel the urge to straighten your posture. Lower your hemline and confess your childhood crimes. You haven't stolen anything since the lemon rop incident of 1839, but you feel like he knows. Some of the portraits are thematic. A woman poses with a falcon. A man grips a sword and a very small dog. A child sits atop a stuffed bear, looking like the ringmaster of your nightmares. You begin to suspect that Victorian portraiture was less about realism and more about sending a message. The message? We were terrifying, and now you have to live with that. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirror positioned between 2 portraits. The mirror, it turns out, is also judging you, but with a slightly more passive, aggressive flair. At least it lets you adjust your hair. By now the room has quieted. The piano recital is over. The sherry has been mopped. And yet the portraits remain vigilant. Their eyes burn with the shared memory of every etiquette failure, every poorly tied cravat, every guest who dared to eat with the wrong fork. You make your way toward the ballroom door, only to pass the Grand Patriarch, the largest painting in the room, positioned directly opposite the entrance, like a final boss in a velvet waistcoat. His gaze is heavy. You nod respectfully. He does not nod back, because in a Victorian home the true hosts are the portraits, and they are never impressed. You're attempting to flirt Victorian style. This means prolonged eye contact, one demure flutter of your fan, and accidentally dropping your glove like it's a coded marriage proposal. It is not going well. Your target, Lord something or other with a title that sounds made up, has been stationed by the refreshment table for half an hour, chewing absent-mindedly on a biscuit and looking vaguely stunned, like a man who just learned what soup is. He has excellent cheekbones, terrible conversational skills, and an air of tragic confusion that somehow only makes him more desirable. You decide he's the one. You ready your arsenal, fan, gloves, and a subtle head tilt you've practiced in the mirror exactly 41 times. You pass by him slowly. Fan at the ready, eyes cast downward, but slightly angled up because smouldering modesty is all the rage. He does not notice you. He is examining a spoon. Okay, round two. You try a stronger move, standing within 3 FT of him and sighing wistfully, as though recalling a love long lost, or a particularly lovely meat pie. He glances in your direction, then returns to the spoon. It's unclear what the spoon has done to earn such admiration. You reposition yourself by the potted fern. This, you've been told, is the prime flirting zone. A gentleman who sees you framed by foliage may imagine you in a romantic woodland setting instead of sweating through linen near a very judgmental buffet. You drop your glove, not by accident. With extreme premeditation, you bend to retrieve it with just enough hesitation to allow for rescue. And it works. A gentleman stoops to pick it up. And oh, it's not him. It's Mr. Peebles, an elderly family friend with a mustache like a distressed caterpillar. He hands you the glove and begins reminiscing about your childhood nosebleeds. You thank him politely and consider leaping out the nearest window. Meanwhile, your chosen target has wandered off, presumably in search of another utensil to marvel at. You sigh again, but this time it's just disappointment. Victorian flirting is not a game of bold moves or witty banter. It is a slow, meticulous ballet of eyebrow lifts, fan flicks, and social landmines. Everything is symbolic. A dropped handkerchief means I'm interested. A closed fan means go away forever. And a prolonged glance can mean anything from I adore you to there's a bee on your kriat. You attempt to follow a conversation across the room, hoping to laugh just loudly enough to seem charming, but not so loudly as to appear unhinged. You produce a sound that can best be described as a dignified snort. A woman nearby looks horrified. You cover it with a cough and pretend to inspect your own shoes. Eventually, your target returns, this time holding a tiny teacup like it's a live grenade. He stands within fan range. This is your moment. You raise your fan slowly like a petal unfurling in moonlight. You flutter it 3 times precisely. Once to say hello, twice to suggest interest, and a 3rd time because you panicked and forgot the sequence. He looks at you. There is a pause, then he nods, just once. You nod back. Congratulations. You are now spiritually engaged. You'll never speak again. Later someone will ask if you had a pleasant evening. You'll say, oh yes, I fluttered my fan at someone holding a spoon, and they'll nod knowingly because in the Victorian world, flirting is less about connection and more about surviving the battlefield of implication. There are no texts, no drinks, no DMs. There is only lace, eye contact, and the eternal question. Did that eyebrow raise me in affection or indigestion? You'll never really know, and neither will he. Downstairs, the servants are laughing. There's actual food, actual dancing, and someone is playing the fiddle like their life depends on it. You envy them, but you're not allowed to join. Instead, you're upstairs, slowly being suffocated by social formality and aspic. Up here, everyone is pretending not to be miserable. Down there, they're not pretending anything. Someone just shouted more pie with genuine glee, and you're pretty sure you heard a spoon hit the wall. The contrast is jarring above stairs, uncomfortable chairs, whispered scandals, and the persistent fear of fainting in front of a duke below stairs. Someone is laughing so hard they've had to sit down. Someone else is clapping wildly to the beat of a jig. The air smells like roast meat and recklessness. A footman passes by with a tray of dry sponge fingers, and you try to casually peer over his shoulder, hoping for a glimpse of the real rye beneath. He catches your eye and gives a slight conspiratorial grin. You want to follow him like a Victorian Cinderella, only in reverse, fleeing the ball in favor of something far more alive. You've heard rumors, of course, that the real parties happen below stairs, that the kitchen maids make up their own lyrics to folk songs, that the butler can outdance half the peerage, that someone once did a cartwheel across the pantry and still got promoted, that the scullery maid is undefeated at arm wrestling. You believe every word. Upstairs, music is soft, conversations are stilted, and someone is lecturing about marmalade tariffs. You pretend to sip your punch, which tastes like regrets and artificial orange. You glance toward the servant's door, and for a moment you wonder, what if? But of course you can't. You're not allowed. The social ladder doesn't go both ways. Not even when the music downstairs sounds like joy itself. And your current conversational partner just used the word Viscounty as a verb. Somewhere down there, someone claps in rhythm. There's stomping, laughter, a burst of harmonized singing. You strain to hear the words, but catch only snippets. She kissed him by the chimney stack, followed by a roar of approval and a fiddle trill so spritly it might actually raise the dead. Your current company is discussing hedge. You excuse yourself, not to join the servants, of course, that would be scandalous, but just for a walk near the hallway with open ears. You find a quiet stairwell and linger by it like a moth near candlelight, trying to soak in the merriment. A housemaid darts past you, cheeks flushed and apron askew, holding a basket of empty tankers. She hums a tune, off-key, joyful, defiant. You hum along barely. You consider striking up a conversation, but she disappears behind a door before you can decide what the appropriate etiquette is for saying, "I want to be where the biscuits are." The contrast is poetic. Upstairs is the performance. Downstairs is the after-party. You may have the title, the lace and the social cash, but you do not have the dumplings or the dancing or the freedom to sit cross-legged and belch after dinner without causing an international incident. Eventually you sigh and return to the drawing room. A man is discussing coal futures. Someone else is asleep with their eyes open. Alady coughs, apologizes for existing, and then coughs again. And somewhere below your very expensive shoes, the floorboards vibrate with music, movement, and the kind of joy that doesn't care about etiquette manuals. Because in the Victorian house the party may be upstairs, but the fun is always downstairs. You step outside into the garden for a breath of fresh air, only to be joined by a scandalous cousin and an over-ulcative pug named Lionel. Both demand your attention. The air is cold, crisp, gloriously not scented with potpourri or the musky despair of overworked cologne. For the first time in hours, you can breathe without inhaling powdered wig residue. The stars are out. The hedges are judging you, but at least they're quiet about it. You wander to a stone bench beneath a gas lamp, hoping for a few peaceful minutes to mourn your social energy. Unfortunately, peace is cancelled. Your cousin Sebastian, the family's official embarrassment and unofficial gossip courier, glides out from behind a hedge, cloak dramatically flaring, like he's starring in a gothic novel that no one asked for. "Escaping, are we?" he whispers, as though you're both in the middle of a conspiracy. "I knew you'd crack by dessert." Before you can reply, Lionel the pug barrels into your shins with the enthusiasm of a cannonball in a cravat. He snorts once, sneezes, and begins gnawing on your hem with all the grace of a toddler in a top hat. Sebastian flops onto the bench beside you, dramatically tossing one gloved hand over his eyes. Parties, so many elbows, so many opinions about marmalade. Lionel climbs onto his lap and immediately begins snoring, eyes open. You're not sure if this is medically normal. You nod because yes, so many elbows and so many people asking where you summer. You don't even spring correctly. You're running on gossip fumes and 3 forkfuls of beige food. "I've already offended Lady Penelope," Sebastian says proudly. "She asked me what I thought of the musical program, and I said I preferred actual notes in my music. She hasn't spoken to me since." You smile. He may be the family disgrace, but he's also the only person in this entire house who's acknowledged that the orchestra sounded like a raccoon playing a violin in a wind tunnel. The cold is beginning to nibble at your earlobes. Your breath fogs slightly. Somewhere in the distance, someone is murdering a mazurka on the piano. You feel no guilt for your absence. Let them wonder where you went. Let the ferns stand in for you. Sebastian pulls out a flask. Of course he does. He offers it to you. It's brandy with a hint of rebellion. You sip it because tonight has earned it. "I saw a gentleman fall asleep mid-pea proposal last week," he says. Lady Caversham pretended it was part of a poetic gesture. Did she accept? She accepted the estate. Unclear about the man. You both laugh quietly, conspiratorially, as Lionel lets out a high-pitched wheeze that may also be laughter or simply pug-created plumbing issues. There's something about being outside that makes the whole performance of the party feel distant, smaller. The rules seem fuzzier in the dark. Your corset still hurts, but somehow it matters less when you're sitting next to someone who once got banned from a yachting club for impersonating a Spanish duke. Sebastian finishes his brandy, then pats Lionel, who burps and sneezes simultaneously. "We should return," he says, "before someone assumes we eloped." You groan, but nod. Duty calls. You rise, adjust your gloves, and prepare to enter the house of eyebrows and endless obligations. As you approach the doors, Lionel trots ahead like a judgmental herald. Because even in the Victorian era, sometimes the only escape from forced charm and strategic marriages. His 5 minutes of night air, a pocket flask, and a pug with no manners. He's back, the man in the velvet coat. He quotes Byron in a low, brooding tone and stares meaningfully into the middle distance. No one invited him. He keeps arriving anyway. He appears like mildew, suddenly unwelcome and somehow clinging to the upholstery. You don't know his name. No one does. He's just Byron Man. He doesn't walk so much as glide, his velvet coat trailing dramatically like a cape stitched from tortured metaphors. He haunts the corners of parlour, reciting poetry with the intensity of someone who has definitely wept at a statue. His voice is low and breathy, like he's auditioning to narrate his own tragic backstory. And every sentence he speaks ends in a poetic sigh, as though the very weight of existence is too much for his cravat. Tonight, you find him looming by the fireplace, staring into the flames as if they've personally betrayed him. She walks in beauty like the night. He inwends softly to absolutely no one. A potted plant listens politely. You try to back away, but he senses movement like a bat with a literature degree. "You know Byron?" he asks, turning toward you with a look of deep romantic suffering. You nod because it's safer, he continues. Most people don't understand him, his pain, his passion, his tragic genius. He says tragic genius like it's a perfume he invented. You attempt to steer the conversation toward normally. "Lovely weather we're having." "Heffrowns, the sky weeps for those who cannot love." He replies as if that explains the barometric pressure. You wonder if you could throw yourself into the punch bowl and claim diplomatic immunity. His velvet coat brushes against your arm. It's softer than it has any right to be. He notices you noticing. It's imported. He whispers from somewhere distant like my soul. You nod slowly the way one might nod at Abby and hope it goes away. Across the room, someone makes eye contact with you, silently mouthing "run." You consider it, but Byron Man has already launched into a monologue about longing. "We are all but shadows," he says, flickering against the cruel brick wall of fate. Someone coughs. Someone else leaves the room entirely. He pulls a dog-eared copy of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage from his coat pocket, as if it lives there full time. He opens it to a random page and begins to read, whispering each line like it's a confession to a candle. You check your watch. It's only been 4 minutes. It feels like 47 years. You try to excuse yourself, mentioning perhaps the urgent need to powder your nose, your shoes, or possibly your soul. But he grabs your hand gently, dramatically. "Wait," he says. "I want to show you something." You fear it's a poem. It is. He hands you a scrap of parchment. Scrolled in looping ink are the words, "The moon mourns me. The stars avoid me. I am love's exile, trapped in a drawing room." You don't know whether to applaud or alert the staff. Eventually, he drifts toward another guest. A fresh victim, and you escape behind a decorative screen, whispering thanks to whatever deity handles social miracles. Byron Man continues his rounds, reciting poetry to anyone with a pulse and enough patience to survive a sonnet. Later, you'll hear he was last seen standing alone in the conservatory, reciting verses to a geranium. The geranium did not respond, because in every Victorian party, there is always one guest who believes intense eye contact and tragic verse are more powerful than personality. And he is never the one who brings dessert. You are now subjected to the host's speech. It begins with a thank you and ends somewhere in a rambling anecdote about a goose named Archibald. Everyone claps out of fear. The room hushes as the host rises, wine glass in hand, posture stiff with self-importance and the kind of pride only a man who's named his home after himself can summon. You are trapped. There is no polite escape. Chairs have been positioned specifically to block exit routes. He clears his throat like a minor aristocrat warming up for opera. My esteemed friends, relations, and those who wandered in by mistake, he begins, already chuckling at his own wit. A few nervous titters ripple through the crowd, mostly from people hoping to curry favor or prevent inheritance-based retribution. What follows is less a toast and more a hostage situation in formal wear. He thanks everyone for attending, names each guest who holds any measurable title, then thanks his wife for once, again enduring my flair for the dramatic. She smiles with the practiced grace of someone who has not felt surprised since 1842. Then comes the anecdote. It always comes tonight. It's about a goose, Archibald. We had him when I was just a boy, the host says, eyes misting. The cleverest bird I ever knew. Could detect a libetta than most magistrates. Once bit a man for wearing the wrong criet. A feathered moral compass, really. You sip your watered-down wine and consider the life choices that led you here. The speech continues. Archibald apparently once foiled a bakery robbery. Archibald also once attacked a visiting French ambassador. Patriotic instincts, the host says proudly, didn't trust continental bread. There are murmurs of agreement, mostly from people too afraid to look bored. You study a crack in the ceiling. It begins to resemble your soul, slowly splitting under the strain. The host segues seamlessly into a tribute to the house itself. This very room, he says, gesturing with his glass, was once the site of a duel over marmalade. Passionate men, those Cumberbatch twins. He pauses for effect. No one knows if this is a joke. They clap just in case. Somewhere near the back, someone has fallen asleep sitting up. Their eyes are open. It's unclear whether they've died or achieved a meditative state to block out the story about how the host once met Queen Victoria's footman's cousin. You glance at the servants who are watching from the doorway with the faces of people who know this will go on exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds. It always does. The speech hits a dramatic high point involving a misinterpreted will, a sheep in a drawing room, and a bottle of port that may or may not have been haunted. Someone giggles. The host glares. This is all true, I assure you, he says, which somehow makes it feel less believable. Eventually, blessedly, Theand approaches. And so he says, lifting his glass as though crowning himself emperor to friends, family, and feathered defenders of justice. May your lives be as full as this house, and your memories as sharp as Archibald's beak. Everyone claps. Everyone always claps. It's not admiration. It's relief. It's survival. It's the hope that with enough enthusiasm, the speech will never return in encore form. You drink the last of your wine. It tastes like grapes that was scolded into obedience. You smile at the host. He bows slightly, basking in the applause. The piano begins again, as if signaling a return to polite civilization. Someone makes a beeline for the sideboard, muttering, I need something solid after that. You nod in solidarity. Because in the Victorian era, the host's speech isn't just a tradition. It's a warning. Someone drops the bomb, an engagement. The room gasps. Someone faints again. Someone else whispers, but she's only got 600 a year, and a Monley drops into a glass. It's chaos Victorian style, which means everyone stays exactly where they are, but increases their judgmental energy by 400%. Teacups tremble, eyebrows ascend. The string quartet falters mid-waltz, then bravely plays on, pretending they aren't dying to know the details. The bride-to-be stands in the center of the room, blinking like a deer in a tiara. Her suitor, an appropriately bland gentleman with the emotional range of a breadstick, smiles faintly, as though unsure whether this is really happening or he just nodded through something important. The hostess claps her hands with forced cheer. Well, what a delightful surprise, she chirps, voice pitched at a register only bats and butlers can truly appreciate. You can tell she wasn't told in advance, and know where emotional plumbing is struggling to keep up. She gestures wildly for more champagne. A whisper races through the room like wildfire through a lace factory. They've only known each other 3 weeks. She met him in Bath at a pump room, no less. Did you hear? He's a second son with freckles and questionable ankles. The family matriarch is visibly vibrating. Her gloved hand tightens around her cane, and she whispers something into the ear of her companion, who immediately begins scribbling notes for a strongly worded letter to someone, possibly Parliament, possibly God. Meanwhile, the bride's cousin faints dramatically onto the nearest ottoman. It's unclear if she's overcome with emotion, scandal, or just bored and looking for an exit. A footman rushes in with the smelling salts, clearly annoyed that this is the third collapse tonight. You edge closer to the murmuring cluster near the fireplace. "Dread a year," someone whispers again, as though repeating it enough times will change the math. "That's barely enough for gloves." Another adds, "Her aunt once wore linen after Michaelmas." What does that tell you? The couple is now standing awkwardly in a bubble of fragile applause. People are smiling with their mouths, but not their eyes. The fiancé looks confused, like someone who just agreed to host a party and only now realize there will be guests. A clergyman leans in and asks, "Have the banns been posted?" It's less a question and more of a threat wrapped in lace. Someone behind you mutters, "She'll need to marry fast before anyone finds out about the violin teacher." You don't know who the violin teacher is, but you're absolutely invested now. You start scanning the room for anyone who looks like they play string instruments and hide secrets. The butler returns with more champagne. The bottle pops, everyone flinches, and Lady Penelope mutters something about the fall of Western civilization. Meanwhile, the bride is explaining that they met during a rainstorm, bonded over their mutual dislike of boiled cabbage, and realized they were meant for each other. The crowd nods, but you can see the gears turning. This union is being evaluated like a suspicious trifle. Everyone's smiling, but no one's sure what's in it. Then the bride's younger brother pipes up. He smells like mothballs and lemon. The silence is biblical. You sip your drink. It tastes like narrative tension. Eventually, a dance is called to break the mood. The couple is swept away, smiling through tightly clenched jaws. Conversations resume louder now, each one containing just enough venom to pass as enthusiasm. Because in the Victorian world, a surprise engagement is less a celebration and more a spectator sport. It's midnight. The musicians are playing something vaguely Hungarian. You are dragged into a sweaty circle of humans who all desperately want to sit down. No one is allowed to. The dance has begun. You do not know its name. You do not know its steps. You are told loudly and with cheerfully ominous grins that you'll catch on quickly. This is a lie. You will not catch on. What you will catch is the hem of your sleeve on someone's brooch, and possibly a case of acute humiliation. The floorboards groan under the collective weight of 30 well-dressed people pretending to enjoy themselves. A wave of exhausted motion passes through the group. Men bowing stiffly, women half curtsying, all of them wishing someone would declare a fire so they could flee with dignity. You are partnered with a gentleman whose hair has fully collapsed. His cravat is askew. His knees creak audibly, and he's muttering something about gout. You sympathize deeply. He smiles weakly and says, "Just follow my lead." His lead appears to involve randomly pointing at the ceiling and pivoting like a disoriented compass. The music surges. It is indeed vaguely Hungarian, possibly inspired by either a village wedding or a goat stampede. You whirl left, stumble right, and are nearly clotheslined by Aladdin Toole, who has clearly taken 3 dance lessons and 1 fencing class. Someone claps in rhythm. Someone else does not. The beat changes halfway through the measure. The violinist is sweating like a criminal. The cellist has gone rogue and is now playing in a different key entirely. You're not dancing so much as engaging in a gentle, structured panic. The hostess sails past, cheeks flushed, declaring, "Isn't this marvelous?" Her face says fun, but her ankles say hostage crisis. You nod, trying to keep in step, which is difficult because there are no steps. There is only chaos. The circle tightens. You are now hand in and with someone who smells like old roses and mild despair. You spin, you bow. You almost sit down mid-turn and are yanked back into action by a peer with the grip of a coal miner. "Not yet," he whispers grimly. "Not until the third refrain. You don't know what that means." You fear you never will. Somewhere in the corner, Lord Wheatham is aggressively skipping. He's far too old for this, and yet he seems to have summoned the spirit of a caffeinated lamb. Every time he completes a turn, his toupee does not. You admire the commitment. Your corset is now actively plotting against you. Each breath feels like negotiating with your own spine. A woman near the fireplace attempts to discreetly undo one button and is immediately reprimanded by her chaperone. The button remains defiant. The musicians crescendo. The tempo accelerates. It feels personal. Suddenly, someone shouts, "Change partners!" You are separated from your gout-ridden guide and thrust into the arms of a young man who looks like he hasn't blinked since October. He smiles too wide, leading with the enthusiasm of a puppy and the spatial awareness of a wardrobe. You hit a chair. Eventually, blessedly, the music stumbles to a halt. There is a moment of stunned silence, followed by ragged applause from people clapping, mostly to confirm they're still conscious. You curtsy out of muscle memory or possibly spiritual trauma. Everyone scatters. A few drop onto ottomans, panting like they've just outrun a bear. The violinist sits down head in hands. The chist throws his bow into the punch bowl. No one questions it. Because in the world of Victorian parties, you can dodge conversation, sidestep scandal, and avoid Byron Man. But the midnight dance, that, dear guest, is compulsory. The room is lit by 312 candles. One of them has started dripping wax onto the back of Lady Beatrice's gown. No one tells her, everyone watches. This is the entertainment now. It begins slowly, a single drop of wax, falling in slow motion like the first ominous snowflake in a disaster film. It lands with a quiet plop onto delicate silk. The silk does not approve. Lady Beatrice, unaware, continues describing her new embroidery pattern to a footman who has mastered the art of appearing interested in nothing. She gestures with the grace of a swan, and the candle wax continues its descent with all the glee of a toddler flinging porridge. By now, 5 people have noticed. No one says a word. You are one of them. You consider stepping forward, interrupting politely, saving the dress. But that would require speaking and worse, causing a scene. So instead you sip your lukewarm punch and become complicit. The wax is picking up pace. It's forming a small stalactite now, threatening to become a full-blown wax waterfall. Lady Beatrix's gown, powder blue, probably French, definitely terrifyingly expensive, is developing what could be interpreted as a slow, melting volcano just below her right shoulder blade. Across the room, a Maidalso notices. She lifts a hand, hesitates, then decides her employment is not worth this battle. She vanishes behind a curtain. She is correct. The string quartet continues playing a somber rendition of something vaguely Bach-adjacent. The tempo is just slow enough to match the drip, drip, drip of wax on silk. You wonder if this is what the Victorians meant by dramatic tension. A gentleman near the fireplace leans slightly to get a better view. He adjusts his monlay, clearly weighing whether this situation qualifies as gossip, fashion critique, or both. Two dowagers exchange a look and raise their eyebrows in synchronized judgment. One mutters, "She did wear lavender to a funeral once." Lady Beatrice still hasn't noticed. Possibly because she's wearing a corset tight enough to eliminate peripheral sensation. Possibly because no one in her immediate circle has the courage to interrupt her description of the new gooseberry jam she's planning to debut at the next garden party. The wax reaches critical mass. A long, graceful stream trails downward, landing just above a series of embroidered flowers. The flowers now appear to be weeping. It is both tragic and beautiful. Someone near you whispers, "It's like an art installation." Someone else nods solemnly. You begin to wonder if this is how most Victorian parties end. Not with a toast, but with the slow demise of a sleeve. A young lady, Lady Beatrice's niece perhaps, takes a step forward, mouth-opening alarm. A firm maternal hand on her shoulder stops her. "Don't!" her mother hisses. "You'll ruin the moment." That's the thing. This is the moment. The highlight of the evening. The piano recital was painful, the dance was exhausting, and the pudding was mostly suet. But this This is suspense, drama, fashion disaster in slow motion. It's everything a polite gathering secretly craves. Lady Beatrice shifts unaware. The candle tilts slightly, sending a fresh splatter of wax like divine punishment. She pauses mid-sentence and frowns. She's felt something, a tingle, a betrayal. She reaches back. Her fingers find the wax. Her eyes widen. The room holds its breath and then gracefully, regally, as though this were all part of the plan. Lady Beatrice turns to her nearest acquaintance and says, "It appears I'm being slowly embalmed. How festive." Laughter erupts. Tense, awkward, relieved. The spell breaks. Someone removes the candle. Someone else fans Lady Beatrice with a program. A third person fetches punch. Because in a Victorian drawing room, nothing brings people together quite like collective silence and a slowly melting tragedy. It's over. You're in a queue for your ride home behind 12 other exhausted socialites. The night is cold. The stars are judging you. And someone stole your muff. The carriages creak up one by one, wheels groaning, like the joints of everyone currently pretending to be 20 years younger than they actually are. You wrap your cloak tighter around yourself, which helps very little, as your stolen muff was the only thing standing between you and frostbite. You consider pointing fingers, but no one looks remotely remorseful, and at least 3 people look muff-shaped. The line moves at the speed of an aging tortoise reconsidering its life choices. Lady Danvers is currently attempting to locate her coachman, who may or may not have eloped with the scullery mate. She shouts into the dark, "Gregory, don't make me walk," which is ironic since she hasn't walked further than a powder room since 1811. You stare at the gravel. It stares back. The party is over, but its effects linger emotionally, spiritually, and in the persistent itch behind your left knee from dancing in wool-blend stockings. Your corset is now less of a garment and more of a vengeful X. Your feet hurt in places you didn't know had nerve endings. You are certain you've aged 3 years since sunset. A gentleman ahead of you begins loudly reciting a limerick about pickled eggs. No one asks him to stop. No one has the energy. You're all just surviving until someone's carriage shows up with enough room to sit down without dislocating something. Your carriage, according to the butler's rotating clipboard system of doom, is number 14. It's currently number 3. You sigh, which creates a small puff of mist in the freezing air and leans subtly toward the lantern for warmth. Someone else does the same. You now share the lantern like Victorian penguins. There is no shame anymore. A pair of debutants behind you are whispering about Lord Hemsworth's dancing like a sack of potatoes with ambitions. One mutters. The other replies, "At least potatoes don't step on you." You silently agree. Hemsworth nearly sent you flying into the punch bowl during the poker. Far in the distance, a carriage overturns slightly on a rut, and there's a distant cry of "my wig." No one reacts. It's too late in the evening for empathy. Lady Beatrice, still crusted in wax, stands stoically nearby, her gown now stiff with irony. She nods at you. You nod back. There is an unspoken bond between those who have suffered silently for 6 consecutive hours while pretending to enjoy boiled meats and interpretive violin solos. Carriage number 7 arrives. You shuffle forward 2 feet progress. At this rate, you may make it home by Easter. You reflect, as one often does while inhaling horse steam and pretending your left foot isn't asleep, on the choices that brought you here. The corset, the dancing, the conversation about tariffs, the prolonged eye contact with the fern, and now the finale, standing in the dark, waiting for someone to collect you like misdelivered luggage. Finally your carriage appears, wobbling toward you like salvation with wheels. The footman opens the door with a frozen smile. You climb in with the grace of a wounded giraffe, collapse onto the seat and exhale so hard the windows fog up. As the carriage rolls into the night, you wrap your cloak tighter, lean back and listen to the clatter of hooves against cobblestones. The stars still judge you, but from a polite distance. Because in the grand tradition of Victorian parties, you came, you saw, you socialized, and now you must recover. Possibly for a month you return home, collapse onto your fainting couch, and try to breathe without sobbing. Your corset is half off, your stockings are around your ankles, and you smell like lamb jelly. It's well past 1 a.m. The carriage ride home is a blur of cobblestones and existential dread. Your footman looked at you with pity. Your maid met you at the door with the dead eyes of someone who's seen too many ruined petticoats, and now you are alone. Alone with your thoughts. Alone with your regrets. Alone with a hairpin stuck somewhere deep in your scalp. The fire crackles in the grate like a judge clearing its throat. Your boudoir is dimly lit and faintly scented with lavender and overexertion. The chandelier above you, thankfully extinguished, hangs like the ghost of social expectations past. Your gown lies crumpled in a pile on the floor like a wounded soldier. You salute it with a sniffle. Your corset, now halfway removed, is somewhere around your ribcage and climbing. It refuses to let go entirely. You consider getting scissors. You also consider just living like this now, corset and all. A monument to poor decisions and undercooked pheasant. A soft knock at the door. Your maid timidly entering with a silver tray and a glass of something brownish and supposedly calming. You nod in appreciation, sip the mystery liquid, and instantly regret it. It tastes like floral regret and burning. Possibly port, possibly punishment. She helps remove the rest of your undergarments with the gentle efficiency of someone undressing a trauma victim. You whisper, "Never again." She says nothing, just nods. You've said this before. You will say it again. Now in your nightgown, you sink fully into the fainting couch. The springs we back cracks. A curl falls out of place and lands on your lip. You don't move it. You begin the mental autopsy of the evening. Did you speak too loudly during the soup course? Did you accidentally insult the ear's second wife by calling her first-rate? Was that really Lord Byron's poetry? Or was the Velvet Man just reciting lyrics from a tavern ballad? Your cheeks flush with retrospective shame. You remember attempting a curtsy during the final waltz and nearly sitting on your own shoes. You recall Lady Cress's horrified expression. You recall the punch bowl incident. You recall nothing else. Mercifully, the smell of lamb jelly still clings to your skin. It's not clear if it's from the buffet or the dance floor, possibly both. The Victorians were generous with gelatin and reckless with elbow room. You stare at the ceiling. It does not offer comfort, only cobwebs and disappointment. Your dog enters thankfully, not Lionel the pug, but your own more dignified Spaniel. She climbs into your lap, sniffs you once and sneezes. You've been judged. You deserve it. You wonder briefly if Lady Beatrice ever got the wax out of her gown. You wonder if the piano survived Doratha's Chopin solo. You wonder if the candlesticks were replaced before anyone else was lacquered into their wardrobe. Your maid returns with a hot water bottle and a look that suggests she's already filled out your resignation letter from society. She tucks it under your feet, smooths your hair, and leaves. The house is still. The embers glow. You are a wreck, a ruin, a post-party relic in ruffled lace and tear-resistant mascara. But you survived barely, because in the Victorian era, parties were never just parties. They were tests of endurance, dignity, and bladder control. And now, finally, you may sleep. If your corset doesn't come back to finish the job, lying in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, you wonder, was this party worth it? The powdered cheese, the unrequited glances, the 6 new blisters. You'll go again next week. You know you will. You'll RSVP with a perfectly inked flourish. You'll wear the same smile, rehearse the same small talk, pretend to enjoy the same pastry that tastes like sweetened drywall. Because that's what's expected. Because society demands it. Because someone once said you had a presence and now you feel responsible for delivering it. Corset and all. But in this moment, you're horizontal, unraveling and cradling a cup of lukewarm sleep potion made from Valium, laudanum and silent despair. Your bed is soft, but your thoughts are not. Was this the pinnacle of your week? Being publicly observed by portraits, dodging wax, choking on perfume poultry, and pretending to enjoy Doratha's piano stylings. You think back to the small talk, which felt more like competitive deflection. Have you heard about the Duke's niece? Not since she eloped with the chimney sweep? Oh no. That was her sister. And you just stood there, nodding along like a social gazelle in a lion's parlor. You remember the glances, the flirtations so subtle they were barely visible to the naked eye. A raised eyebrow, a fan twitch, a glove drop that might have meant I love you or I have gout. You'll never know. But you do know that Lord Ashcraftoft never looked at you once, except when you sneezed during the grace. Then there's your feet, currently wrapped in 3 layers of linen. They pulse with the rage of 1,000 betrayed ligaments. You danced with at least 6 men, 2 of whom had entirely different understandings of the term tempo. One stepped on you with the confidence of a man stomping grapes. Another apologized mid-spin and never stopped apologizing. You sighed deeply, the bed cacks in sympathy. Was it the food? Was that the highlight? The cheese that smelled like a haunted attic? The jelly that trembled with malice? The wine that tasted like betrayal and rhubarb? Maybe it was the moment you caught Lady Beatrice's eye and exchanged the briefest flicker of mutual recognition. 2 humans in silk armor, acknowledging the absurdity of it all with a quarter-second glance. Was that worth it? Your dog sighs at the foot of your bed. Even she looks tired. You sit up slightly, clutching your hot water bottle like a stuffed confidant. Your reflection stares back at you from the vanity mirror. Rouge-smeared, curls deflated, expression caught somewhere between defeat and digestion. You whisper to yourself, never again. And yet there was something, the candlelight, the hum of the string quartet, before they gave upon tempo entirely. The soft crunch of gravel under your slippers as you stepped outside and breathed in the cool night air with Leonol the pug panting beside you like a wheezy confidant. There was laughter, genuine at least once, possibly when someone knocked over the fig pudding and blamed a ghost. Possibly when Byron man recited tragic verse to the coat rack. Possibly when your corset popped with a sound like divine intervention and no one noticed. And so, yes, you'll go again. You'll lace up the corset, powder your cheeks, and prepare to nod until your neck muscles give out. Because in the absurd, over-perfumed theatre of Victorian society, there's always another night, another dance, another opportunity to teeter between ecstasy and mild gastrointestinal distress. Because if nothing else, it's never boring. You reached for the soup spoon, but now you're not sure if it's the correct soup spoon or if you just committed social suicide. Every move you make is haunted by an invisible rule book no one gave you. You laughed too loudly, bowed too shallowly, and now you're spiraling over whether you curtsied with the correct foot first. Probably not. The Daga Countess is squinting in your direction with the intensity of a hawk spotting a mouse. You try to breathe. You really do. But every breath seems to make your corset tighter and your anxiety worse. There are 16 utensils beside your plate, and none of them look friendly. Someone next to you just used a tiny fork to delicately spear a grape, and now you're holding your soup spoon like a trowel in a crystal palace. Across the table, a gentleman is folding his napkin into Aswan. You're not sure if this is a coded message or an attempt to establish dominance. You accidentally drop your bread roll. It bounces. You stare at it in silent betrayal while pretending nothing happened. The panic sets in like slow poison. Did you call Lady Winthrop Baroness? Is she a baroness? Is she even a lady? Is she possibly just wearing someone else's tiara and pretending? Why didn't you study the peerage before coming here? Why didn't you memorize the correct order of address for dukes, viscounts, and people who look like furniture? You sip from your glass. Wrong one. That was finger-rinsing water. You've just seasoned your mouth with someone else's cuticle rinse. You smile politely and pretend it was intentional. Refreshing, you murmur. Someone nods. Someone else blinks twice in horror. You try to sit straight. You try to keep your elbows off the table. You try to remember the 6 rules about forks, the 7 about greeting nobility, and the unofficial but absolutely enforced rule that you must not under any circumstances say the word pants. A butler walks past. You panic and thank him. He did not speak to you. He did not even glance at you. You've broken a wall of the social pyramid. And now he looks at you like you just offered him a tax form. Your laugh bursts out too loud during Lord Ashcraftoft's anecdote about pheasant hunting. Everyone turns. You try to turn it into a delicate giggle. It echoes like a goose in a crypt. Lady Creaser drops her spoon in shock. You pretend to cough and then apologize for coughing. You are now overthinking your breathing pattern. You curtsied when you arrived, but did you go left foot first, right foot first? Is there a foot hierarchy you're unaware of? The Darge account is still watching you. She has not blinked since the soup arrived. You consider confessing everything and turning yourself into the Ministry of Manners, if such a thing exists. You realize you just referred to nobleman as Mr. instead of the Right Honourable. You also accidentally nodded instead of bowing. You may have greeted a bishop like a neighbour's cat. The walls are closing in. The chandeliers are judging you. The bread knives are mocking you with their sinister, buttery silence. But then, blessedly, someone sneezes into their elbow. The room gasps. A real scandal. The pressure lifts. All eyes shift. You're off the hook. You mouth a thank you to the sneezer, he winks. You are still spiraling, but now with company. Because in Victorian society, etiquette isn't just manners. It's a full-contact psychological sport. And you're playing it while wearing a bone-crushing corset with no rule book and at least one fork too many. Good luck. They weren't supposed to be here, but someone brought their small Victorian gremlins anyway. Dressed like miniature undertakers and whispering in Latin, they glide silently across the ballroom like haunted dolls. One of them is chewing on a lace curtain. Another just informed you very solemnly that you're old and doomed. You don't know where their parents are, possibly summoning them with belps from another dimension. At first, you think they're part of the decor, stiff collars, grim expressions, and limbs that move like they've recently emerged from a sarcophagus. But no, they blink, they breathe. One adjusts his tiny crivet with the self-importance of a judge preparing to sentence someone for an overcooked roast. You make the mistake of making eye contact with one. He doesn't blink. He simply points a gloved finger at you and mouths the word, "Repent." You're not sure if he's quoting scripture or threatening your soul. But you break the gaze immediately and begin re-evaluating your life choices. The smallest one, who cannot be older than 6, is armed with a hobby horse and the wrath of God. He gallops through the drawing room, knocks over a foot-tool and shouts, "Onward to Belgium." A butler flinches. Lady Danvers Monley falls into her conce. A girl in a velvet frock slowly drags a stuffed rabbit behind her as she moves from guest to guest, whispering their secrets back to them. You're wearing rouge. You skipped communion. You drank the finger bowl. And then she vanishes beneath the buffet table, leaving only a trail of ominous giggles and mild psychological trauma. You try to corner Owen and ask where their parents are. He replies, "I was raised by wolves and governoresses," then hands you a dead beetle and walks away humming a funeral march. You consider alerting someone, anyone, but the adults are all pretending not to notice. Children are like ghosts in Victorian society. Spoken of rarely, acknowledged only when they start setting fire to things, and always expected to be seen and not heard. Unfortunately, these children are both seen and deeply, unsettlingly heard. A young boy with perfectly combed hair approaches you and asks, "Do you believe in the inevitability of entropy?" Before stealing a sugar cube and sprinting into the hall, you stare after him, unsure if you've just been part of a philosophy lecture or a mugging. At the card table, one child is shuffling a deck with terrifying precision. No one taught him. He simply emerged from the nursery with the innate ability to ruin someone's fortune. His partner, a girl in satin, lifts her teacup and says, "I know your secrets, Lord Thistlewood." He folds immediately. One of them has somehow acquired a fencing foil. He challenges an Ottoman to a duel. The Ottoman loses. By now, the guests have started forming tight protective circles, backs to the walls, sipping their drinks nervously and flinching at the sound of small feet. It's unclear how many of them there are. They appear in pairs, trios, and once, disconcertingly, in a group of 7, chanting something in French and pelting each other with candied walnuts. You retreat to a corner thinking you're safe, only to find a child already there, silently petting a taxidermy badger and whispering lullabies in Latin. You smile nervously. She smiles back. Too much, too long. Eventually, a governor swoops in with the energy of someone 10 years past caring. She claps her hands once, barks, bed, and like that, poof, they're gone, scurrying into side doors, vanishing behind velvet drapes, returning to whatever nether dimension they emerged from. The room exhales, drinks are refreshed. Someone weeps softly. Because if the party didn't break you, the children almost certainly did. You were just trying to get a drink. Now you're stuck in an awkward moment by the punch bowl with a manamed Crispin who keeps calling you madam and staring at your clavicle like it owes him money. You attempt to pivot to safer ground, but the punch is unusually alcoholic and the floor is sticky. Crispin begins reciting limericks. This is your life now. You're not sure who invited Crispin. You're not even sure he was invited. He may have arrived by accident or emerged from the wall like a very dapper ghost with boundary issues. He leans on the sideboard with one elbow and swirls his punch with the flair of someone who believes they are roguishly charming, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. "Madame," he says again, pronouncing it like a scandal in progress. "Did it hurt when you fell from heaven?" You blink. You consider saying no, but it did when I landed in this conversation. Instead, you smile politely and laugh in that brittle, polite way that signals both amusement and mild spiritual disassociation. Crispin leans in closer. You lean slightly into the punch bowl. Her launches into another limerick. Something about a governess from Kent and a mix-up involving an umbrella and a bishop. The hyme is loose. The content is loose. His morals are predictably loose. You nod vaguely and glance around the room in desperation. There is no escape. Someone has moved the potted plant you were planning to hide behind. The nearest cluster of guests appears to be deep in a theological debate, or possibly a séance. Crispin refills your glass uninvited. You are still holding the last one. The punch, now 80% sherry and 20% regret, sloshes dangerously. You sip to avoid talking. You instantly regret it. It tastes like fermented jam and poor decisions. He starts quoting poetry badly. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" He slurs. "You're hot and bright. And also, you're hot." You nod like this is new information. Behind Crispin, Lady Featherstone gives you a look. You can't tell if it's pity, amusement, or silent applause for your composure. Crispin, unaware of your growing existential dread, adjusts his cravat and begins recounting his travels on the continent. "I once ate a snail in Paris," he declares proudly, as if this qualifies him for the Foreign Office. "It changed me." You believe him. Something definitely changed. Possibly his digestive health. The floor beneath your shoes is sticky with punch trifle, and maybe the dreams of better company. You try to shift subtly to the left. Crispin mirrors you. You shift to the right. Her mirrors that too. You're now doing the world's most passive-aggressive gavotte. A miracle occurs. Someone interrupts. Crispin, a firm voice says from behind you. "Your aunt is looking for you." She says you're banned from the West Wing. Crispin pales. Well, duty calls." He vanishes in a cloud of eau de cologne and wounded pride. You sag against the table. The punch bowl, half empty and faintly steaming, reflects your face back at you, rosy, flushed, and visibly rethinking every social event you've ever attended. A stray raisin floats by like a survivor of a shipwreck. You refill your glass with water, real water. Cold, tasteless, blessed. You toast your reflection and take a long, glorious sip. Across the room, Crispin has cornered a fern and is complimenting its fronds. The fern looks deeply unimpressed, because at every Victorian party there is always one Crispin. You can't avoid him, you can only endure him, and hope the punch bowl doesn't claim your soul in the process. You made the mistake of asking about the wallpaper. Now you are being escorted, trapped really, on a painfully detailed tour of every room in the manor. You've been shown 7 parlors, 5 identical staircases, and a stuffed parrot that once belonged to a Prussian ambassador. You stopped feeling your feet 6 rooms ago. You've eaten meals shorter than this. It started innocently enough. You admired the wallpaper in the front hall. Chinoiserie, you think. Or possibly just florals that have gotten aggressively out of hand. You smiled and said, "How lovely," which apparently unlocked a hidden switch in the hostess's soul that released her inner docent. She clasped your arm with surprising strength, smiled with the zeal of someone who hasn't spoken to a willing participant in hours, and whispered, "Let me show you the rest." You were not given a choice. Now you're somewhere in the East Wing probably, though it could just as easily be the North Parlour Annex Extension alcove corridor. Every hallway looks like it was designed by someone who had a grudge against natural light and an unlimited supply of carpeting. You pass your third library. All of them are described as intimate, despite being large enough to hold parliamentary debates. You nod politely as you're shown the collection of first edition field guides to mushroom identification and a particularly dusty tome allegedly bound in the hide of an especially rude boar. The hostess is relentless. She describes the provenance of each chandelier, the lineage of each foot tool, and the scandalous tale behind a chipped figurine involving a Hungarian count, a game of wise and something known only as the raspberry incident. You try to appear interested, but your soul is slowly leaving through your eyebrows. She shows you the music room, and then the winter music room, and then the informal, impromptu, casual emergency music room for when one is suddenly overtaken by sonatas. All three have harpsichords. All three are allegedly in regular use. All three are decorated in shades of mauve and menace. You reach a gallery entirely devoted to ancestral portraits. She points out each face. That's great Aunt Philomena, who predicted her own death down to the minute. That's Cousin Gilbert, who once bit a bishop. And that's Uncle Francis, who married his second cousin by mistake. We don't talk about it, but we do hang him prominently near the stairs. You've been walking for what feels like a Victorian eternity. Your shoes are conspiring against you. The ball of your left foot is filing a formal complaint. You would sit, but every chair is either ornamental, occupied by a doily, or protected by a velvet rope. She shows you the morning room and the just-in-case of imperial visit room. You were then asked to admire a particularly rare fireplace screen that was embroidered during a fit of nerves by Lady Agatha in 1832. You nod again. You've been nodding for so long, your neck is now permanently tilted at a 30-degree angle of passive submission. Eventually, blessedly, you catch a glimpse of the drawing room from which you were abducted. Civilization noise punch, people who are not explaining the history of drapery tassels. But the hostess pauses. "Have we shown you the conservatory?" You panic. "No," you say firmly. "But I hear it chaunted. I wouldn't want to disturb the spirits." She hesitates. Her eyes narrow. She considers whether this is a challenge or a cry for help. She decides it's best not to anger ghosts tonight. She releases your arm. You escape back to the crowd, to the noise, to the questionable cheese. Because however bad a Victorian party gets, it's still better than being held hostage by curtains. You've said your goodbyes. You've collected your hat, your wrap, and your dignity. But now, you're stuck in the vestibule mid-curts as a new wave of guests arrives. Social rules dictate that you can't leave while someone of higher status is entering. So you hover near the umbrella stand, trapped in a strange Victorian limbo, like a polite ghost doomed to haunt the foyer forever. You were so close. The evening had taken its toll. Your shoes were conspiring against your toes. Your corset was now 12% structural damage, and your soul had quietly slipped out during the third Merca, but you had done it. You survived. You outlasted the punch, the piano recital, and the small child who accused you of being a withered crone before biting the edge of the billiard table. Your shawl was on, your farewells delivered. You made it all the way to the entrance hall with a smile that was 80% manners, 20% trom. And then they arrived, the Marchioness of Frensington, the Honourable Miss Violet something Orather, a man with sideburns so commanding they had their own postal address. They sweat in like an operatic tide, furs trailing behind them, voices lilting with the confidence of people who've never accidentally said bottom in front of a bishop. And now you can't leave. To exit as they enter would be a social faux pas on par with burping during grace or confusing a duchess with a decorative urn. You're now frozen by the door, trapped in a vortex of etiquette and cold marble tiles. The butler nods to you solemnly. He knows he's seen this before. The foyer frees. You try to casually lean on the umbrella stand, but it wobbles, betraying your attempt at nonchalance. One of the new arrivals looks at you with faint confusion, as if you're a particularly unconvincing plant arrangement. You attempt to make small talk with a fellow prisoner of the vestibule, a minor baroness who also mistimed her departure. She whispers, "I haven't seen daylight in 6 hours." You nod wide-eyed. Time has no meaning here. Another guest tries to sneak out past the queue of arrivals. The butler steps forward. There's a gentle throat clear. The guest pivots, mutters something about "left my gloves," and disappears back into the coat hallway. You sigh and glance longingly at the door. Your carriage is probably outside waiting, or possibly it gave up and left. You wonder if it's socially acceptable to climb out a side window. Probably not. Not unless you're fleeing an accidental engagement or a flaming punch bowl. The new arrivals take forever to unlayer. Furs, gloves, muffs, fans, monleys, elaborate hats requiring multiple removal steps, and a support team. One woman removes a cape, then another cape beneath that, and finally reveals a gown the size of a bell tower. She smiles. You weep internally. You try to fake a casual re-entry into the party. "Just forgot my reticule." You chirp, scooting 2 feet backward and pretending you absolutely meant to return to the room full of wax, Byron quotes, and light social suffocation. The Baroness looks at you with the quiet despair of someone who knows you'll never escape. And then finally the door is clear. You glance at the butler. He gives the faintest of nods, the ceremonial nod of release. You flee down the steps into the cold night, your shawl flapping behind you like the wings of a freed spirit. You did it. You left without being trampled by rank. Because in the Victorian era, leaving a party wasn't a moment. It was an odyssey, and sometimes it was harder than arriving in the first place. So tonight, as you sink into your clean sheets without having to dodge a child dressed like a Victorian funeral director, take a moment to feel grateful. You survived the party, sort of. You endured the corset crisis, the overcooked mutton, and Lord Crissen's unsolicited poetry. You danced until your toes whimpered. You smiled until your jaw locked. You made small talk that required large effort. And somewhere along the way, you accidentally offended a VI count by using the wrong spoon to gesture at a fern. But that's the thing about history. It wasn't made by the people in the portraits. It was lived by the people who tried not to spill gravy on their only pair of gloves. The ones who braved social minefields, armed with nothing but half-remembered etiquette and a smile that said, "Please let this be over soon," because beneath the starch and the lace and the scandalous eyes, these were just people. Awkward, hopeful, anxious humans just like you. They wanted connection. They wanted to impress. They wanted to eat something that didn't bite back. And even when they were being silently judged by 17 oil paintings and a spaniel named Lord Whistlebottom, they kept showing up. So as you close your eyes tonight, tucked safely into a bed that isn't stuffed with straw and ancestral guilt, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those strange, overdressed souls who came before you. They paved the way for central heating for sweatpants, for leaving a party when you want to, because history may be itchy, pretentious, and confusingly scented, but it's also funny, fragile, and entirely human. And now it's time to let go. The party is over. The candles are out. And finally, you get to rest. Good night.